we have what I hope is an interesting talk for anyone that may have been here last year and saw my talk or rant, maybe it should appropriately be called, because this is very much a joint talk between two practitioners and two nerds, and one of them went the vendor route, but comes very much from the same space of my frustrations, my challenges, difficulties, the things I spoke to last year. So hopefully everyone will enjoy it as a little bit of an extension from that.
Thank you, everyone. I'm a vendor by frustration. I'm Francesco Cipollone, or AKA Frank for friends. So I assume everybody in the room is a nerd and is a friend, so call me Frank. I come out of PTSD, and I've seen things in my life and in your life that you will never believe. Who can reference this? Okay, good. This is the good crowd. But yeah, I've seen vulnerability management folks and software folks from a security side shouting at engineers and saying, can you fix just these millions of vulnerabilities by SLA, X, Y, and Z? And the engineers say, there isn't a fix, or why should I fix a container that doesn't have this stuff? And then all of that gets translated into management and CISO, CTO, and CRO shouting at each other without any pure context. So I built a product out of frustration to fix this problem. And we don't talk about here about marketing, but we talk here about solution. That's why we go so well along together. And I hope you don't get offended by memes. If you do, please walk out, because we use it plenty. But I think the industry and the talk and the kind of frustration that we have is so big that if we don't laugh about us and it, we get into depression. So for me, this is my mental safety net, and talking about meme where frustration level hits the roof. A little bit of slide. So I've been in the industry for the past 20 years, mostly in banking. I did a little bit of UN, so a lot of war zones, and they don't connect to each other. So I just got frustrated by Warzone and went into banking to be frustrated mentally. And in all of this transformation, I've seen people shouting at each other without context and without translating high-level risk objective to what engineer actually had to do, and as well how engineer talk to security. There is a massive disconnect. And over time, I managed to find that if you talk about anything without data, you get disagreement, but it's really hard to disagree with data. So a lot of the talk and a lot of the information that is here is data that hopefully you can use and take back and saying there is some rationale about this and there is a better way other than, hey, can you fix by SLA 3 days? So it's a dense talk. Or should we do the intros first? All right. It's a dense talk, so we're going to talk, if I can control the clicker. We're going to start with a little bit of a walk back in the past. Why do we have these kind of problems? And then we're going to hopefully remove the PTSD out of vulnerability management and start talking about this is the future and this is a way. There is no silver bullet. So I'm going to just lay it out here. There is a lot of hard work, but there is a better way. And then we're going to see a little bit of the new stuff that we're looking at about the threat-centric approach and about how to tackle vulnerability at scale. And that's very much vulnerability management at scale between software, cloud, infrastructure, and everything else in between. Over to you.
All right. If you were here last year, you'll remember a little bit of this. So we're going to do audience participation. Hands up if you did see my talk/rant last year. Okay, excellent. Got a few people. How about put your hands up if you believe your company has a functional vulnerability management program? Okay, yeah, that's a lot of...
we have brave folks out here.
Yeah. And keep your hand up if you believe that that program actually covers all areas and scopes of vulnerabilities. So not just AppSec,
We have honest folk out.
not just infra, but all of it. And then keep your hands up if you also believe you are fully prioritizing findings by normalized risk. So not 5 different scores from 5 different tools. Okay. We have one hand up, oops, at the back, and we don't believe you. So we'll, however, last year when I did that, his hand was up. So we'll definitely have to have a chat and talk to you.
Prove us wrong.
Yep. So my background has very much been in the practitioner space, from defensive security to offensive and vulnerability management for probably a decade now. I worked at Rapid7 doing internal security, vuln management, pen testing, and then also worked in the consulting wing. So I did a lot of customer installations, building programs, helping them get a functional vuln management program. After that, I wound up doing back to practitioner side, implementing Tenable. So I got the full experience, and that was a very different era 10 years ago. Back then, things were in a much more simplified state as far as the topology of our infrastructure, where we drew boundaries, which was basically just a DMZ. Managing systems and code was a very different world than what we face now. So today, as many of you are probably aware, it's a little more complex. Knowing exactly where everything lies and whether you've got internal physical systems, external, colo, cloud, and then all the apps, where they're running. Are they containerized? Are they not? Are they on bare metal? Are they in VMs? Oh, don't forget about your secrets and library.
LLM?
LLM. I mean, it's gotten to a point that this really started driving me crazy. Doing network scans for data collection was mostly out the window, and things have just become harder and harder. And I'm stubborn and not one to give up, so I'm still up here talking about vuln management. By far, I definitely, you mentioned depression earlier, mental health and well-being, burnout. That was definitely something I hit a whole lot, many different times at many different businesses. Too many alerts, too many criticals. You investigate the criticals, they're not actually critical, they're not actually true, and you just burn out because you're losing the faith of the people you're supposed to partner with. You're getting alarms at all hours of the day. There's a brand new O-Day that came out, and everyone freaks out only to find out later, contextually, it doesn't matter in our environment. And that'll lead you straight down to burnout. There you go.
Yeah, and very much in that space. And over time, I discovered that on one end, we have a major vulnerability now a week. It used to be a month, it used to be a year, now it's a week. So we are definitely in a different era, and I'm going to talk later about that, but we have more vulnerability than we can actually manage and scale, because now this is a problem of scale. And I'm pretty much about avoiding burnout, because as security professional, doing spreadsheet, that's not what we signed for. That's not what we studied for. But that's what we end up doing. That's the job description that should be published for every security vulnerability analyst. But that's not what we should be doing. We should be really focusing on the threats that actually matter, communicating to the team the right things, or helping them suggesting what is the remediation that matters. We end up saying, hey, can you fix this list of spreadsheet things by SLA? That's a machine job. And that's what I created Phoenix originally, to help me communicating to the engineer in an automated way, but also aligning that with executive expectation. Because without executive buy-in, and we're going to talk about this later, it's impossible. But we need to talk in a different language. And if we continue doing vulnerability management by spreadsheets, right now we are 300,000. We are soon to be at 1 million vulnerability declared over a year if the NVD doesn't collapse before, and it is with government shutdown and funding. It might be because we have more vulnerability, it might be because we have more scrutiny. In general, we have more vulnerability that we can handle, and they're not even declared fast enough and not with the right amount of information. And what Nate was saying, one of the challenges that we have is the world is divided. We still think about application security, software security, and environment security or runtime security as two different things. They are part of the same things. They are very much interconnected. So we should be going to a world where we're not looking at how many problems we have and how quickly can we address. But the question we should be asking is, who does what where? Should they worry about? Should they fix it? And how important it is? That's the kind of key question that you should ask. And I'll invite everybody to go back and looking at the vulnerability that you guys have in your organization and try to answer that question. Because as soon as you start asking, who owns that? That's usually where it stops. All right. And the reason why we have more vulnerability than ever is because we have agentic code generating AI slop, but also attackers are using agentic work to lower the barrier of entries and generating not only AI slop, but also exploitation. Remediation time has gone back from, if you believe Mandian, from 64 days to -1 days, that I don't think is a mathematical numbers, but 3 to 7 minutes to 7 days, depending which report do you use, from declaration time all the way to execution. So we have less time to react about things, so we should focus on the things that really matters, contextualizing them, knowing that we can actually fix them, and knowing who should we go to actually ask to fix specific things. And then we have the other side of AI slop. I don't know if anybody has seen the declaration of Kerr, completely frustrated by AI just being thrown at the code and generating, this is potentially exploitable, of a library that didn't even exist, and more of the case. So they actually retired their bug bounty program because they were receiving more AI slop than ever. So there are definitely a less barrier of entries to actually try to play with vulnerabilities. And that's, as defenders, something we should be aware of. The problem is how we address this problem today is we launch a bunch of vulnerability scanner. Scanner said so. We have tons of critical. We break pipeline, or we tell engineers, you should fix all of the critical high and medium from whatever that tool spits. And then we have 5 or 6 or 10 different tools, depending on the size of your organization and the madness that you went through. And that's not a way to go. Because half of that, even 1% of that, is the one that actually should be cared about. And we should focus not on vulnerability, but actually in remediation. That is the second part that I would like to focus on. But we definitely are there with vulnerability being thrown at. And if any of your CISO asks you why we're not secure, or if any of your CTO why we're not secure, just give him that slide. There is a new vulnerability every week. And reacting fast to this is important, because otherwise we say that's exploited. And we fixed it 2 months ago. It was exploited 2 months ago before it was fixed. But yeah, eventually we got there. But jokes aside, we have a new category of vulnerability. I don't know if you played around with the .NET or with the infamous Shai Halud. So we have vulnerability coming up from every different part, and I literally write a security advisory every week right now. I used to write this every month. I write one every week. So it's definitely a different world where we need to react fast. So, because I haven't run enough, you want to take it away?
I semi-spoiled a little bit of this, but now I get to do it again. Again, this is kind of a continuation from last year, which was very largely a rant. The 5 different products, each product implements their own prioritization method. It's not that we still only rely on CVSS, right? Nobody here still only relies on CVSS. Hopefully we've stopped that. So every vendor has started building their black box magical score, and now you have 4 of them, you have 5 of them. You're trying to figure out, well, this critical and that critical, which of those criticals is actually the critical? And that just leads you around in circles and through all the fun frustration. Having built vuln management programs, worked with customers, clients, that's not us. That's not us. No. Is that your desktop? Yeah. At least it wasn't my desktop. It's just been 10, 15 years of frustration, really. And I've watched lots of vendors come in and proclaim they've got the fix. But again, very much, oftentimes it's the tool starts with network-based scanning, and then they add application security, and then they add vulnerability container scanning, and it's still not even holistic within that one platform. And building a picture becomes nearly impossible to put everything together because we've got different tools for AppSec, different tools for infra, different tools for cloud. Some of them might have some overlap, but you're still going to wind up with at least 3 different tools, maybe 2 if you're lucky, and even then, they're both going to have their own black box magical score. And that's not the way our environments actually look, and that's not the way they work.
And then you got pen test, bug bounty, manual finding, threat modeling, and so on.
Yeah, all the things. So one of the topics I brought up last year was I still mostly see this as 2 solutions. You build your own system and solve the problem for yourself, or you go out and you buy it and you use somebody else's interpretation of what the problem is and what the solution is. And that was a big part of the challenge I was facing and feeling last year. And so where this kind of comes full circle is he built it and I'm partnering with him to solve it together.
We built it out of frustration, though. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, because there wasn't anything available.
Yeah. He came from the same frustrated place I did. So the problem is still very challenging. Which path do you take? So if anyone remembers, the silver bullet, the quick fix, it's still exactly the same as last year. There isn't one. Still doesn't exist. Still not there. This is a very complex challenge and problem to solve. And even with the partnership and where we've come, it's still difficult. It's not easy. It's not simple. But there are ways to actually get there in leveraging certain mechanics and systems that are very important and critical. So I love asking the question about the successful vulnerability management program, because what I found most often as a consultant is that many places would say, we have a very successful, healthy, and fully functional vuln management program. And then I'd look at it, and it would just be AppSec for production. No infrastructure scanning, no network-based scanning, no endpoint scanning, just AppSec. I'm like, I guess that's successful and in your scope, but your scope is not your whole business. So what if you actually add in infrastructure? Oh, well, we use this other tool to scan our servers. Okay, what about all your endpoints on desktops, laptops, workstations? No, don't do that? Okay, well, if we just make the scope as simple as possible, then we can all pat ourselves on the back and go home.
That was called ISO.
So it's a challenging problem that I don't intend to give up on by just putting blinders on, is the frustration.
Yeah, so we're not here to say there is a silver bullet. It's a complex problems and there are different aspects. And more importantly, every business is different. What's a priority for one business that builds software is a completely different priority for a business that builds infra and buys software. So every business is entirely different. But there is also a silver lining that starting identifying what's more important is start getting easier. We have data, we have data point, we have intelligence that we can tie things together. And as Nate was saying, if you look at CVSS, you are looking at the beast on the left, on the 300,000 vulnerability. Out of those, just if you want to take one data point, the ones that are really important to fix are the ones that are weaponized, available outside, and then if you want to layer on externally facing, reachable, and so on. Now, answering the second part is way more optimized, but also harder, and that's what we're talking about. So, is all doom and gloom? No. We're here to demystify some of these doom and gloom, but if you're looking at your vulnerability and not risk, then you are more into the doom and gloom. If you're not prioritizing with context, you're more on the reactive and doom and gloom. If you're not attributing the right vulnerability to the right team, you have failed. Because you can prioritize to death. You can get to the end vulnerability that is not exploited, but who you deliver it to? They're gonna just sit there and nobody's gonna do anything about it. So unfortunately, vulnerability management is pretty much an asset inventory and management and attribution problem. And that's the hard part because does not only rely on security, but it requires a collaboration between security engineering and the rest of the business. Now, the other complexity of all of this, and we're still in part one, by the way, so brace yourself, we're gonna go a little bit faster. But the whole world between software and what I call environment and how you prioritize these two beasts are correlated with each other, but you have different metrics and different characteristics. A simple example of how you go from millions of vulnerabilities or 204,000 last year, 300,000 this year. If you just look at the exploit available out of these data points that are very much available if you dig a little bit, but you're looking at 17,000, 9,000 vulnerability actively exploited. If you're looking at Kev, 3,000 vulnerability actively exploited with a fix available on their scope and context, major caveat. And then which are the hot vulnerability that are really exploited in the wild? Where do we have data point who are exploiting this vulnerability? That in itself is a lot of prioritization, but still doesn't solve the context problem that really can get you to a 0.1% of vulnerability or even less if you really want this. Which asset is critical? Which line of business do we care about? Are these externally facing? And then all of that above. Still, you need to do asset inventory and routing those things, the important stuff, to the right team. Otherwise, they're not going to fix it. Who should fix it? Now, who can give me the definition of this particular word? What's exploitable? How do you define exploitable? I want one answer, two answers if you can. No? We don't know? When you say a vulnerability is exploitable, what does that mean? Okay. That's probability. Just it? There is a threat that could be realized somewhere? Yes. Do we have evidence of exploitation? Is somebody using it? Is all of the above, Like how popular an exploit is. Do we have a particular area that is being used and used in the wild? Was it a 0 day? Likely a 0 day will become an exploit that it's used in the wild because they're going to have a time where they're going to use it. Is it automatable? Is it easy to exploit? Doesn't it require user authentication? Is it remote code execution? Can be triggered remotely? Is it actually exploited in the wild? Do you have evidence of exploitation? Is it actively used? Was it a legacy exploit? Do we have sophisticated threat intelligence where that vulnerability has been seen in a ransomware attack or an incident? That's what you should pay for your refined threat intelligence feed. Anybody else that sell you anything else, please do not buy. But that's the definition of exploitable, and that's just one of the area that we should look at when we say a vulnerability is exploitable in our risk context. And again, I like to bash the security scanning tool because that's why we're in this particular situation of millions of vulnerability and no direction. We have detection but no direction. And if you look at the bottom of the scale, that's where you get all of your vulnerability from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tools. And we should move up the chain and really look at what's contextually reachable, what is the risk that it delivers to my business, and is it delivering on a line of business critical, and do I know which is the business owner that I can go and convince to fix those things? That's where I would like everybody to be to remove the PTSD from all of this. But let's present the silver bullet.
All right. The silver bullet. Oh, wait, nope, still not yet. Almost there, but not quite. So, as a former consultant, I used to ask the question, because back then it was not CIS, what is SANS top 20 number 1? And I found that most people, most companies had number 20, the last thing to do, a pen test. But they couldn't tell me what the first thing was, which is asset ownership. It's never going to stop being critical. It's never going to stop being a question I ask when I interview for businesses, because I want to know if you aren't even giving this serious consideration, I'm not coming to solve a problem that you're currently not working on. So ownership is fundamental for the other half of the picture, not just the vulnerability, threat intelligence, and exploitability and all of that, but actually looking at who owns infrastructure, who owns cloud, app, pipeline. Again, going back to all the different pieces, all the different pathways, we need to know ownership for each one. Who's responsible? Who's going to patch? Or who's the executive who might own the risk and has to make a decision? So a good way I like to phrase ownership is stewardship. And that can be a good way to change the message within a business, because ownership can sound like blameship, and stewardship sounds a lot more like taking pride in your work and what you're trying to achieve and build. And it's extremely critical for vuln management to have this type of metadata. They feed us and we feed them better information. So it's a circle and a cycle that's never going to stop or end, but it's never going to stop being absolutely critical. This might be a first for me. I'm going to sell my soul a little bit and take a picture from Gartner.
It's my fault.
Sorry, I think I threw up a little in my mouth. So they finally got a new acronym because that's what we need. Acronyms are how we solve problems. You can see from the acronym soup at the bottom, try to figure out how many of those you do know versus don't know. But across the top is our ever favorite scoping, discovery, prioritization, validation, mobilization. There's a new one.
Just called fix.
Yeah. Let's put new words on it, then we can sell it again. The real picture comes back to a little bit more simplification, but starts again, asset ownership. And even better yet, a little maturity milestone is the automated attribution. I know a lot of places that if they have to do any kind of compliance and they're showing evidence of asset inventory, they pull out spreadsheets. That doesn't work very well when you get to a very large scale. So all of this information is a huge part of what leads us to things like the contextual deduplication. Anyone catch the joke there? Or correlation and root cause, because again, root cause becomes very fun when you ask, well, this server is vulnerable, so the sysadmin should fix it, but it's deployed through this pipeline, so is that DevOps? But it's actually this app, so it's the app team. Where's the root and who owns that? Well, it could be 3 different owners for the entire thing, not just the one. When we finally get this information, we can really start contextualizing and enriching our data. The thing I like to try and communicate to people is the more information they can provide me, the less terrible, crappy data for vulnerabilities I can give them back. Maybe generic is the word, the less generic vulnerabilities I can give back. And this has long been something I think many of us have known, but again, achieving it across 5 different tools and infrastructure, code, cloud, that has always been the problem.
All right, let's unpack this very simple scenario. Now I'm like, that is the usual scenario that Nate was describing. Like, you have a piece of things that is owned by a team on the left, and the complexity is not just that it's built into something, but it also morphs. An asset morph from being a piece of code in a repo in being a piece of artifacts sitting somewhere else, that piece of artifacts being deployed. So you need to also consider things like lineage. You might have a vulnerability that comes from one place, but it's fixed in another place, or it's manifesting in another place. And the team that owns that piece might be very different. So you might have engineering team that build and run their own system, or you might have platform teams on the right that only look at chassis, platform, patching, and so on. And you might have other engineering team that just look at software, Docker file, how do you compose things, library, fixes. And sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. So if you just slap them with SLA, they might have different owners, the app owner and the platform owner. It is complex. If you try to build something like this on a spreadsheet, good luck. It's not anymore the age to actually do something like this. And then the app in itself has a lineage, a traceability, a life cycle where it starts in a piece of code, it moved into an artifact, the artifacts get built into a container, the container get deployed in a register, the register get run in multiple places, and you need to stitch together all of those things. Engineering takes weeks to put together a picture like this when a vulnerability gets exploited in 3 days.
Well, so is it actually a life cycle if it never dies? You just keep all of the old and it's just there forever?
Yeah, possibly. Well, vulnerability, well, I don't want to be negative on that, but it's something that is very close to the medical science, because you need to find the root cause, you need to find the evidence, and you continuously triage this problem. And if you don't have an MRI, because this is fundamentally an MRI of the system, with the problem is you don't have organs and owners of organs in an organization. Unfortunately, you have different teams that operate at different stage. So telling them, please fix this, is hard. And if you don't have a good ownership that take into account all of these things, giving direction to people that don't have any levers on fixing vulnerability means you shouting in the win. So the place where I want everybody to go is in something like this, that is what I call lineage or graph of lineage, where you have the app on the left and you have the morphing things of like that app is actually generated by that piece of code. That piece of code has build file, they have libraries that are present in a container. That container get deployed in a registry. That registry runs somewhere. That piece of container is actually externally facing. These are the owner of that service. These are the owner of that apps. The truly things that you need to fix is not in the container, it's in the app. For specific library, for some other things might be the build file or the yeah, I have it in the other one. Not the app, but the image, or not even the image, the origin of the image. That could be your base image. That's. I hope everybody is building base image out of their own registry, not of Docker Hub or any random things, because that might be. Oh no, yeah, we do SCA, so we just pick random code from random places. Sorry. Yes, but having control of that means that you know where the vulnerability come from, and you can tell an engineering team, hey, look at there, and that's the problem, and that's where the vulnerability manifests. Yeah. I'm gonna speed it up a little bit, and I'm not gonna go through this painful exercise, but fundamentally, this is how a vulnerability life cycle out of a library morph. You have a library that get built into an application, that get built into a container, that get deployed somewhere else, and then you need to consider the layers. So when you have your favorite CSPM of the world that's going to shout at you, the vulnerability is inside this container, is actually not in the container. So if you shout at the engineering team, they're going to laugh at you because it's not there. And the favorite answer is, prove me that that's exploitable, or that's a false positive. Those are all canary answer to you're not addressing the right problem, and I don't have time to spend on troubleshooting this. So one of the favorite things that I like to do is graying out the things that you should not look at, and tell me which other vendors tell you not to look at things versus look at those shiny new alerts. Call me madman, but that's what I want to do. That's what's remove burnout. The next vendor that's going to mention reachability analysis, give them a quiz and say, what of the 5 reachability analysis should we consider? I have a whole paper and talk about this, so I'm not going to go through this. But the things that we just look at, that's what reachability and lineage are. Trying to understand if something is actually reachable by a threat actor and how bad that vulnerability is. So the things that I would like to focus on is moving away from this technical detail, because we love this stuff, or I love this stuff. I live in this every day. But any business owner, any particular person that talks business doesn't talk this language, talks risk. So the question that they like to hear is it bad? Am I exposed? Should I worry about it, or should I postpone it? And we build a fantastic funnel for that, because it delivers the exact things to say, hey, you have a lot of this problem, but the one that you should really care about are these things. And if you talk to any business person, they love this, because it tells them that's where I should focus. That's the direction I should take. And then building a picture of like, is this something I should worry about? Is this something that is exploitable, deployed in production, reachable? A lot of vulnerability management is selling somebody that doesn't want to do the work they should be doing. So it needs to be precise, it needs to be actionable, accurate, and they can actually do something about it. You actually need to be talking to the right person. So I want to show this picture because this is the evolution that everybody that does in risk management works throughout. So if you are in the Middle Ages, you're looking at CVSS or CVE-based vulnerability prioritization that is unidimensional. We don't live in Flatland. Anybody have read Flatland? All right. Oh, I'm in the right crowd. We're not living in the flatland. We live in a three-dimensional world where we have multiple contexts and multiple things. So when I talk about risk, we can use risk to actually display how important is an application, how important is a piece of software, where it runs, what are the likelihood of exploitation. We can feed into this element tons of metadata and intelligence and things with hiding all of that complexity and again translating that into risk and again reachability analysis. And then you can consider CVSS for how bad potentially that thing is. But that's a single scoring matrix. And as Nate was saying, there is yet another scoring matrix, yes, but we created a framework so that you can feed more of this information into this and avoiding that hiding spot.
Feed your context, your data, your environment.
Yeah. But it's risk. It's nothing else than how bad it is potentially, what is the likelihood that something's going to go bad, and how much it's going to impact the business. Everybody talks about this language. Shall we talk about relief and how we fix this together? Go for it.
So all of a sudden, like just 15 years of frustration was once again welling up, thinking about the more I learned, the more I realized how doomed I was and how hard it was going to be. And I'm happy to say that with a lot of work and a lot of conversations, Frank and I actually met because I was ranting on LinkedIn and he dared to try and offer a positive input. And I realized
I have this problem.
I realized he was a vendor, and so he got my usual response. And slowly but surely, we just kept talking, and from that basically comes a real success story. This is, again, the funnel that he showed, and this walks through the entire 7 stages of giving actual context and removing duplication. And duplication isn't just this finding in the same tool twice. It's 3 different tools found the same thing, but they found it 3 different ways, and those all need to be correlated and normalized into a single finding. So we start all the way on the left, and these use real-world percentages starting at 100%, and in stage 2, stage 3, we go down to minus 20%, so container throttling and removing duplicate reprioritized risk. In the second half, we get down to negative 22, then we drop to minus 95, 97, 98, meaning when we're talking about vulnerabilities that matter, criticals that matter, we're seeing about 0.5% to 2% are what actually matter. Not based on the world's opinion, but based on our context, our internal business information of system criticality, data criticality, environmental settings. We are able to take the vulnerability exploitation information, but then merge and marry that with our business context. And I really like being able to say to an executive, yeah, take that number you currently have, and when we're done with this, you'll be down to single-digit criticals. That was my goal from the beginning of getting hired. And that's where we're finally getting to, is that handful of teams have single-digit criticals that actually matter. So we've had some great success here in our reduction space. SCA is just one of those incredibly noisy indicators of vulnerabilities. Yes, we have lots. We know we have lots. There's so many of them, but this is an approach and a system that actually works, and the numbers are making my job easier, to say the least, to be able to talk to people about 98% reductions or hundreds of thousands of man hours saved or millions in saved time and money.
But we get back to doing things that matters, like the hours saved are not just because we want to gloat, but because this is machine solvable problem where we can go back and actually solve the real problem, reacting to a high major vulnerability, making sure that our executive are comfortable with, hey, we have these things in handle, we know how much is the blast radius, we got this. So I hope this was illuminating. It's a hard journey, but it's rewarding. We wanted to come on stage to say there is a problem. Everybody suffer from it, but there is also a solution in a better way. It's not going to be super easy because it requires collaboration, asset inventory, it requires a journey. And you're going to continuously evolve, but you're going to get better and better, and there is recognition. And we've been suffering from PTSD from this problem for the past 20 years. So it's hard to believe that there is a better way. So that's what we wanted to come on stage and say, these are the numbers. There is a possibility. There is a way. This is how we did it.
And very much talk to both of us, because we came from a similar place in the world of frustration and have pursued it in different ways that ultimately landed us in the same place and the same conclusion. So this is very much a lot of information to take from either one of us and jointly.
Yes, and I want to just do a little spin that you can't solve this alone. It requires a coordination between security, business sponsorship, and engineering, a collaboration between these three units, because you're not going to know who owns what. But if you made it simple enough for engineering to give you the data that you need to asset inventory and ownership, if you rely on tool like Backstage that they already use, or maintain a file, or any other source of information, and you can plan it in your vulnerability management solution, then you make their life easier because they live in something that they can have an influence, and you please don't ask them to log into ServiceNow and declare or they report the container that they have, because they're going to hate you for that. And the other things is it requires forward-looking vision to believe there is a better ways after 20 years of problems. So shout out to Lance for believing in this, and to the rest of the executive team that I believe that there is a better future. Now, I'm a vendor, so I'm going to do a little bit of shout out about ourselves.
I made him promise to keep it short.
I'll leave it at the very end, but fundamentally, we are a unified vulnerability management solution that look at whatever you build, run, and then give you strategic direction from a business perspective and from an engineering perspective of what you should solve. And we focus pretty much on solving the whole life cycle, not just the central part where everybody's focusing on just prioritization, but looking at what you build, where you run, and who should fix it, and how you should remediate. You can bring your own data, scan with us, and this year we've been focusing on remediation agents because we're going to use the LLM, what LLM are actually useful for producing last mile remediation at the very end. We've been awarded stuff from IDG and other platforms that talk about us, but the one that I'm more proud of is this, is people saying this works and leaving advisory and confidently saying this has worked. And the Gartner Peer Insight, I know that it has Gartner logo, but it's actually customer testimonial that are fully vetted and is of high value of insight. The new stuff we've been working on is depicting a lot of the threat intelligence and helping you building a better story about vulnerability and vulnerability management, because connecting the dot on what's exploitable and what are the patterns that actually you could eradicate to remove vulnerability, and which threat actor are using that particular pattern, is what helps you convincing everybody else to focus finally on fixing vulnerability. And we're so confident about it that we're not going to hide it behind a wall, but you can test our agent and our intelligence things for yourself, and please use better and improve metrics. We published 3 agents, the researcher that does basically all the research analyst and analysis, and then more recently the remediation agents that give you remediation plan or last mile remediation actions directly on GitHub and in the future compensating control. And again, as Nate was saying, I've write a lot about this. We've wrote about how we retrain the LLM, and it's a collaboration with Google, so we had access to Gemini. I've wrote why we choose Gemini and why the precision matters and what kind of data from that LLM we used. But otherwise, I think we're at time. Thank you very much for believing there is a better way. Thank you, Nate, for jumping on stage.
I gotta say, one of my favorite white papers you did was the SLAs are dead, because I hate SLAs. I hate that question. I hate everything related to it. Hit the last slide quick.
Yeah.
So after he did his shilling, I want to again stand up here and say, I'm a huge curmudgeon when it comes to vuln management, and I loathe most vendors, and am very vocal about it and have no issue with that. So I don't stand next to a practitioner turned vendor
Partner.
with, without very strong reason. There's a lot of products out there that will tell you, yeah, we solve this problem too. I've not found one before this, and the approach continues to be incredibly collaborative. So if you want to speak to me first to get some truth, please do so, because I am very excited for the next 12 months in my future and career, and have had an incredible team, and specifically a team member here who takes a lot of the responsibility for that great success. So, and my boss isn't too bad either. So,
Thank you very much, everyone. Let's fix this.